Welcome to episode 27 of the Adventuring for Mere Mortals podcast. I'm Kyle, joined by co-host Trevor, and this month we chat with YouTuber Kalman Tinka of Everyday Backpacker. Trev, want to take it away?
Hey, Kalman. Thanks for coming on the podcast, man. It's good to have you.
It's good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Well, yeah, Kyle will do our normal little intro, but I guess we can start with what we've been up to the last month or so. Kyle's a busy dude now. He's always on a trip or doing something. So, Kyle, what have you been up to, man?
It's been crazy. Work has been absolutely crazy with various projects, wrapping things up, starting new things, trying to acquire various items, which you would think would be a trivial feat, but it is not. And then maintaining sanity through adventuring. Let's see. Spent a week in Colorado, Breckenridge, for a ski trip. Last part of the Epic Pass, the last hurrah. And it actually worked out well. It snowed pretty much every night. And if you got on the expert terrain, etc., you could actually have some powder that you could play in. So that was fun. Most recently, the earthquake in New Jersey. I was saying earlier, I was gearing up, that happened at Friday at 10:23. Shortly thereafter, someone sent out a message that was like, did anyone feel that? I think there was an earthquake. That's whenever things went crazy. Whenever I left work, I had multiple requests for interview and comment. Some of the conversations I had were absolutely crazy. So the epicenter was actually over a Trump National Golf Club. So you can imagine the conversations that came out of that. A number of questions about, is this the end? The eclipse is coming on Monday.
Are they related?
So this happened on Friday. Are these two related? Is this something that, and nope, that's purely coincidental. And then lots of follows up on aftershocks and things like that. What's going to happen? This happened in New Jersey, but what does it mean for Pennsylvania? Will there be earthquakes during the eclipse? What happens if there is? And
the earth will shake. It'll be fine.
It turned into a very, very exciting day that none of us were planning for.
The grocery stores are having a run on tinfoil hats.
I went to the store, didn't see anything crazy. But there was at 5 p.m. a magnitude 4 aftershock. And so it was actually caught on camera because a number of news stations had already made it to New Jersey to the epicenter. And there was some shaking and some crazy faces and stuff like that. But I actually felt it at my house. So I've actually experienced more earthquakes in Pennsylvania than anywhere else. So this is the second one. The 5.8 back in 2011 or 2012. I can't remember what that was. I was in grad school at the time, and I could actually see by watching the light in our office, because I was on the 4th floor in the geology building, I could see the light start shaking back and forth, which was the pressure wave. Then you could see it go kind of side to side. That was the shear wave. And then it started doing these backward loops. And that was the Raleigh waves that were coming through. And that was pretty cool. This one, it was 4.8, I think is what they settled on. But it just felt like I was floating. Like it was this weird sensation that I was floating. And then my picture window in the living room, it just sounded like a big truck or jet was flying over or driving by. but there was nothing. And so far, no reports of damage, injury, anything like that. Well,
It's good.
there have been reports of damage, but it cannot be conclusively linked to the earthquake. But
Do you work for the insurance company now? That's what it sounds like.
I guess I do a little bit of everything now, but keep calm, carry on is what
Yep.
yep. That's what I felt like. It's guys, this happened in a fault zone. It's where we'd expect it. It's not in some crazy place where we really should be worrying that there is an earthquake. But yeah, that was fun. So
Yeah. I'm super jealous. Like I went to grad school to study seismology, and I still have not experienced an earthquake. I guess I've lived in not earthquake prone places like Louisiana, Illinois. So, and
well,
the
I
few
guess that
times I've been
just
to
makes you a bad
California,
geophysicist then.
it does. I'm a failure. I'm a fake. I'm a phony. I can't call myself a seismologist because I've never experienced one. I just know all about the theory of them.
Spoken like a true PhD.
Yep, that's right. I know the math. I know how it works.
What about you, Trev? What have you been up to? How's the pup?
Yeah, like very much like you, very busy with work. It's nonstop nowadays. I've been having to go out on the boat quite a bit. I was out there for 2 full weeks, and I'm going out there again, looking like not this week, but next week. Hopefully for shorter amount of, hopefully only 3 or 4 days that time. But yeah, really busy. Things are going on. Like I'm in this data science development program now. So I'm actually like taking classes again, and I'm going to teach myself Python again so I can get back into coding. So that'll be fun. Again, I used to know it kind of. Now I don't. And now I'm going to have to reteach myself. Yeah, that's cool. But yeah, outside of work, actually did some outdoorsy things with my family. So over spring break, kids are off school. So we stayed in Kanab, Utah, but we went to Zion, Bryce, and some of the surrounding state parks. Like I think my favorite one out there is Coral Pink Sand Dunes. Love it. Yep. It's gorgeous. It's like $10 to get in. These gorgeous dunes, and yeah, we had a blast. My kids were like, I think my son carried about half the dune back to the car in his shoes and clothes because he just kept rolling down the dune. But they loved it. And I think that was both my kids' favorite thing that we did. But yeah, really great. I mean, there was a lot. Like I was still like it seemed like the differences in my head of like when I go with my kids and my wife versus like when the whole crew of us go out and hike. I have to like, oh yeah, I can't just hike like crazy. I'm like carrying my son when he gets tired, or when he really wants to walk, or my daughter really want to walk. We're going a lot slower. We're investigating all the little things. So I had to like get that part of my brain. It's like, no, slow down, appreciate, explain these things that my kids don't have experience with. So it was a lot of fun. And my wife, she's not super outdoorsy, but she loves taking pictures. So she was just snapping pictures of our kids and all the beautiful scenery the whole time. So yeah, that was good. Other than that, I mean, the winter is now tapering off. So I'm like stopping or just wrapping up a few more little things inside my house that I'm fixing. And now I will shift to outdoor stuff. So gardening, fixing all the stuff that I don't like in the outside of my house during the summer. So yeah, but yeah, what about you, Kalman? What have you been up to, man?
So yeah, I work in outdoor retail, and oddly enough, this outdoor retail seasons vary slightly than actual seasons, especially out here in the West in Montana. And so it's a pretty quiet time for us work-wise right now. So we are busying ourselves with, we just got a new system for our register, so that's been kind of stressful. But otherwise, work has been pretty uneventful. Fortunately, we have not had any seismic activity here, considering the Yellowstone caldera is 3 hours away from where I live. I have experienced some earthquakes out here, something I didn't experience much when I lived in Ohio. But yeah, it has been pretty quiet there. And as far as outdoor activity stuff, as I mentioned before, Montana, it's one of the hardest things to get used to being a Midwesterner. And moving out here is in the Midwest. Once March rolls around, pretty much you can get out and do whatever you want to do as far as outdoor activities. Unfortunately for us, the majority of the places that we do our outdoor activities don't start thawing out until about June. So right now it's just like frustration because you're like, you want to go out. It feels really good down here in the valley, but the mountains are just completely frozen over. So I'm kind of in a holding pattern. We did go up to a Forest Service cabin on my birthday at the beginning of March, which was really cool. We did an overnight. We hiked in few miles in, classic stupid moment. We got to trailhead, didn't look like there was that much snow. Oh, we can leave the snowshoes in the truck. And like a mile in, we hit 2 foot deep snow drifts and just, kept snowing on us in, but we eventually made it back to the cabin relatively unscathed and had a pretty good time with that. So should have been a snowshoe trip, wasn't a snowshoe trip because of our stupidity. And classic last words, but hopefully here soon we'll be able to get out and do some more backpacking as things start to thaw out.
Cool. Well, I think we should move into I don't know if we have a main topic. We're just gonna have a nice little conversation today. So I think a good place to start is, just tell us a little about yourself. Like, we know you live in Montana, but like little background, how you got introduced to the outdoors, that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, I live out here in Montana. I'm originally from Ohio. That's where I grew up and lived until 2014 when I had an opportunity to come out here. I was only supposed to be out here for a couple of months. I was at the time working for Ohio State Parks as a naturalist, environmental educator. And it was an off season, and a friend of mine invited me to come out to work off season at a nonprofit out here. And obviously, anybody who lives in Ohio that loves the outdoors ends up in a place like Montana. They're not going back to Ohio. No offense to my buddies in Ohio, but it just wasn't in the cards. As far as how I got into it, I think it's a pretty classic trajectory. My dad was always going off, when he was younger. I remember hearing stories about trips of him in all the national parks, especially Yosemite, which is kind of a near and dear place to my family. And I heard stories about him and my uncle going there all the time. And then I got into scouts. And so I grew up and I had a pretty active scout troop. So we used to go out on all kinds of different trips. Some of them things that I really enjoyed, others I didn't enjoy. For me, we did do some spelunking. Though I don't really care for that.
Oh, you're gonna hurt Kyle's feelings.
Sorry,
No,
Kyle.
You're not gonna hurt my feelings. It's not for everyone. It's
it was somewhere when we were scooting along a long corridor that was semi-submerged with only our chest and head out of the water and our helmets tucked into a corner. I was like, I don't think I need to do this anymore. So, but other things like backpacking, we did get kind of involved in, and in 1997, I'm dating myself here a little bit. I am middle-aged. When I was 17, I had an opportunity to go to Philmont Scout Ranch, and we did a 10-day trip out there. My memory is it was over 100 miles, but I've learned that as I've gotten older, my memory has turned into a bloody liar. So it may not have been that much, but it feels like that much. But it was a really great opportunity. And it wasn't the most easy trip for me. In fact, I had some pretty big issues, this being in the late 90s. Of course, we were wearing the big heavy boots, and a classic rookie mistake. I didn't break my boots in well, and so my feet were just hamburger by the end of it, and we had some other issues and definitely was kind of struggling. But, at the same time, we had a lot of really cool experiences. One of them, for some reason, that stands out in my memory was we spent time in the Philmont used to be a working ranch, and some of the old ranch facilities are still there and they're still used as part of the trek. And I remember we got to one of them and they told us, oh yeah, there's a well out back you can get your water from, but it's got methane in it. So when you pump it up, you want to leave the lid off so that the explosive gas can leave, and then you can cap it. Of course, that caused a bunch of us teenage rocket scientists to go out and try to light it on fire, which we successfully did a couple times. But as far as like the struggle of it, I remember being pulled aside by one of my adult leaders. He kind of remember telling me that, not every trip is going to go planned, but how you approach it mentally can make it a good trip or a bad trip, whether you choose to focus on the negatives and be miserable, or you look to the fun stuff and forget about the bad things. And that kind of stuck with me. And being a stubborn individual, I decided that I wasn't going to let that be my only experience, as hard as it was. So, out of all the people in the group, I'm the only one that still backpacks. I'm definitely the only one that turned it into a career. Um, but yeah, so just kind of continued on. Eventually, I became a firefighter paramedic, and then outdoor activities were a great break away from dealing with all that stress and that. Kind of continued on, and then I was volunteering for some outdoor rec programs and met some people and found out that you can kind of do this as a career. And so, after 10 years in the fire service, I quit my career and went back to college at 30, and went to get some degrees. I got degrees in ecotourism and adventure travel, which is where I did my outdoor leadership program. And then the other one was natural and historical interpretation, which I did as a career for a while, but basically doing environmental education and stuff like that. So I, tell people we have a smattering of knowledge over lots of different areas that make me really irritating on a backcountry trip when I start telling people useless knowledge about various trees and rocks and things like that, and they just look at me like, dude, we don't care. But yeah, like I said, then I worked for Ohio State Parks for a little bit, and after that, I moved out here. And nonprofits it's really tough to make a good living in a nonprofit. And they're great missions, but the pay wasn't there. So I kind of stumbled into working outdoor retail, which is really a dangerous job for me because it comes with a really good gear discount. So I've been doing that ever since, and basically just feeding my addiction of being able to get out and just hike throughout the amazing Montana wilderness. So, long story short, yeah, I just kind of stumbled my way into making a career out of a hobby.
Well, that's great. Yeah, you definitely found the love what you do and make a career out of it aspect. So that's great to hear. And what you've kind of left it out is you have a YouTube channel that you have devoted to this hiking. So you're actually also doing that. Like, tell us a bit about your YouTube channel and what you do with that.
Yeah, so that was another thing I just kind of stumbled into and never really anticipated being a thing. But I do have a YouTube channel. It's called Everyday Backpacker. And basically, I had been filming a couple things. I'd seen some other YouTube channels. I thought it'd be fun to film it, just share it on my Facebook. And several of my friends who don't get the opportunity to, be out as much as I do were like, man, you should really do more of that. And so I started thinking about it. I was like, well, maybe it would be kind of fun. I only expected it to be like, stuff to share with my friends and family and stuff. So the premise behind it was I wanted to do something that was more geared towards like the weekend warrior, people who are just getting out a couple nights at a time. Because a lot of the YouTube channels that I watched at the time were all like through hikers, like Darwin and Dixie and those people that are amazing, amazing channels. But I can't wrap my head around doing one of the big three, let alone all three of them and all that. And so the name was kind of a play on the idea of the everyday backpacker, which it's, I guess, may or may not qualify for anymore since I do it full time, basically. But that whole idea was, of course, the funny thing about doing anything on the internet is anytime you think you're doing something that's novel, you find out that no, actually, there's a couple 100,000 other people that are doing it, which is great though because a lot of those people have actually become my friends. So
That's
there's
cool.
this really cool community of YouTube creators out there that are backpackers. And I think when you do something on the internet, you always prepare yourself to get a lot of pushback from people and just trolls and things like that. In actuality, what I got the majority of was just really supportive, really awesome people. I think that speaks a lot for the outdoor community in general. It's generally a pretty accepting group, and it was no different. So it started out small. I wasn't really expecting anything. I just kind of grew it organically. And last year, I hit 1,000 subscribers. And so I went monetized. I made a whopping $114 so far, but that's not the whole reason for doing it. But it's just really cool, and it's really neat to see that a lot of people, are taking interest in my silly little antics on online, and and that's what makes it fun. It's more about the people that are watching and the people that I get to interact with, and just kind of meeting new people in this community and getting to do things like this, and it's just been a lot of fun. So, but yeah, it's just a hobby that somebody who's as introverted as I am, it's amazing to think that I could get into doing something like that. I still hate seeing myself on camera, and I still hate hearing my own voice. But it's a very interesting thing when you're kind of forced to push yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone. So it's just kind of another cool opportunity to kind of share in that community.
No, and that's great. And like I feel like your motivation or what you're at least doing now is very aligned with like what we do here with the podcast, where we're just like regular people and we think the outdoors are awesome and we want everybody to go out and enjoy it as much as we can. And there's hundreds, thousands of different ways to do that. And so that's why I think it's just great having you on, because I think we're on the same team for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's why I actually, when I heard about your podcast on Trail Show, I thought I should check that out. And sure enough, I was like, it's exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for. So it's been fun to follow it, and so now it's fun to be part of it.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you for coming on. Um, we've kind of talked a little bit beforehand. You said that currently, you mentioned you're middle aged now, that you are using your hiking on top of your YouTube channel just to like work on your fitness and also to help with some PTSD that you've had from your firefighter days. I don't know if I even have a question for that. How does that help you? Is it like a meditative type of thing, or is it just relaxing to be out?
Sure. Yeah, it's hard to explain. It's even hard for me because PTSD manifests in lots of different ways. And for me, it manifests in a really odd way of creating anxiety in life. It's funny because if I showed up on a car accident scene and there's people laying all over the place and carnage and everything, I'm like completely calm and collected and I can move forward. But when I get into situations where I have to do kind of what are generally considered menial task, I have sometimes overwhelming anxiety that kind of comes into it. And so, I've had different ways of kind of dealing with that. I've been through various forms of therapy, and I think anybody should go through that at some point in their lives. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually very helpful. But one thing that I find that being in the outdoors is exactly like you said, it's almost meditative. It's an ability to kind of disconnect from all those various stressors that are kind of pulling me in different directions and creating that anxiety. And I'm far enough removed from it now that the PTSD is pretty controlled. I don't know that ever those symptoms ever really go away, but definitely have a lot better coping skills now than I did, especially right out of being in the fire service. But it's the biggest thing is like I notice it almost instantaneously because of it. I do get a lot of anxiety, and part of that anxiety is in trip planning, even though I enjoy trip planning, but like constantly worrying about forgetting everything and all that stuff. And I'll feel all of those feelings right up until I get to the trailhead. And in the moment my foot hits that first step on that trail, all just goes right out the window. And
Oh,
all
that's
I'm
awesome.
focusing on is what's in front of me and what the experience is going to be and how much fun I'm going to have. Yeah, in a sense, it becomes a way of just kind of shedding all of that baggage. I always jokingly say I trade my everyday baggage for my backpacking baggage,
Yeah.
to help me kind of to kind of lay some of that down. The one of the joys, I guess, of being an ultralighter is my backpacking setup is considerably lighter than all that other stuff that I carry out throughout the day. Um, so yeah, and I've done solo backpacking trips. And I do hike with some, really good friends of mine, and so the whole experience is just a great almost cathartic thing to just kind of separate. As much as I love doing it at the shop and everything, I don't think I would ever do something like gear or guiding,
Mhm.
because then it becomes work, and I think it would change the dynamic. And so the actual act of backpacking for me is very much a non-work related thing. As far as like the physical aspect of it, one of the interesting things about forcing to look at yourself repeatedly on video while editing videos is that you really get a critical look at yourself, and it's very easy, I find, to let my weight. I battled my weight for pretty much after I got out of the fire service, because it's constant stress, bad eating, all that stuff that goes into us tending to let physical things kind of just fall aside. And when I first started the YouTube channel, I was probably pushing about 300 pounds. And there's one of the first trip videos. There was a scene in there where we're setting up, tearing down camping and ready to go. And I just remember looking at myself going, man, have I really gotten that bad? And so, and not only that, but also realized that it was affecting my performance on the trail. And so it became a motivating factor to be able to change my lifestyles, not only for my full fitness, but also to make it easier for me to do the thing that I love. Because one of my big concerns when I got to that point was I was struggling to be able to even backpack healthily. And so, again, it was more or less changing my entire lifestyle in order to facilitate the thing that I really enjoy. And so, obviously, that had benefits in both ways. Yeah, it's one of those hobbies that I think can have impacts on pretty much every aspect of your life and health,
Yeah.
if you let it.
No, that's great. Like you hit all my points.
Good.
That's
I
perfect.
thought I was rambling.
No, 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 not at all. Like I personally haven't ever dealt with any weight issues or PTSD, but I've in very similar ways, but maybe I don't know, less importantly. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but I find the outdoors relaxing very much like you do. Meditative is perfect. And I there's been times in my life where like work or kids, I've like stopped working out, stopped hiking, stopped running for periods of time, and then I go back and I'm just like, I can't breathe. My brain hasn't thought about it. It thinks, oh yeah, you can still go out and do this. And I go, I'm like, oh, I try to run like a mile and I'm just like wheezing and I'm stopping like, okay, we got to work on this. We got to get, how did I get to here? We got to work to get back. So
Sure.
in a different manner, but very similar channels.
No, it's very interesting. We always, I think, as a society, try to put like quantitative levels on both physical and especially mental health. And it doesn't take a PTSD level thing to deal with anxiety or other kind of issues and then have the therapeutic effect of an
Mhm.
activity like backpacking, help it. It's a little bit more in your face, and a little bit more involved. And I think, but anybody at any level can have some sort of a benefit from, being able to get out and do something that they enjoy and have it affect them positively. So,
Definitely.
Whenever you go out, you said that you do both solo and group. In what situation do you favor one over the other, and kind of why? Like, what's the decision whenever you're going to go out solo? Is it a goal? I'm going to do this trail. I'm going to accomplish this one thing, or I just need to be alone and or versus a group. Um,
yeah, there's some outside factors that come into play there. I haven't done as much solo stuff lately because I do live in grizzly country, and so there's some safety concerns with
Yep.
going out solo. But fortunately for me, a lot of the people that I do backpack with, we're pretty good about giving people the space and stuff, and so it doesn't necessarily feel like you're like constantly on. And I do like the people that I hike with. There are definitely times where I do prefer to go solo. And typically those will be maybe um, if I'm particularly stressed out or something, it's just nice to kind of pop away for a little while. But I do have to be very careful about where I go when I'm doing solo. And then also for me, solo trips tend to be shorter because it's a little different, I think, when you're out there by yourself. It's nice because you kind of are able to kind of, be a little bit, you don't have to talk, you don't have to do any of those things. But after a while, it does get a little bit like repetitive. I don't know if repetitive is the right word, but for me, my attention span gets shorter and stuff. And so for me, the being on a solo trip for an extended period of time actually starts to generate its own weird kind of mental stress. And so I don't do those for super long periods of time. But I generally like a weekend or something like that. I think it's nice to be able to kind of get away. Um, but when I'm in an area where that's not safe to do, having the right people along that, although we do hike and stuff and we camp together, generally speaking, like when we're out hiking, we don't talk. We'll have enough space between us where we could kind of see that the other person's there, but they're not right on top of us. But I don't know that I have a real like criteria for when I do or don't do the trips. It's just sometimes certain trips are more easily done solo, and so I might choose to do that solo. But yeah, lately it seems like a lot of them have been with other people. And another factor of that is that for the last 3 years I haven't had a car. So I just recently got a car, so I'll probably do some more solo stuff now that I have the ability to get myself out there. But it's also convenient to be able to have somebody along for it. And plus, like I said, one of the guys that I hike with, I call him my hiking mentor. He's got great stories and great experiences. He's done way more than I am, and I hope to be half as cool as he is in my 70s. But so I think you can gain just as much from being with the right hiking partner as opposed to being solo.
Yeah, you mentioning hiking solo can create its own type of anxiety. That resounded with me a lot. So I'm trying to think exactly when this was. It was at least like 7, 8 years ago. I was hiking the river to river trail in Southern Illinois. It goes from the Ohio River to the Mississippi River or vice versa. And I started out hiking with Kyle and I's buddy Alex. And like a day or two in, he got some really bad blisters and had to bail. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this myself. And I was still, decently young, mid-20s. I was like, okay, we're just going to do this. We're going to go and crush it out. And during the day, I was just flying, hiking really fast. And at night, when I like stopped, I realized, wow, I'm really lonely. I'm just like sitting here. It's like, and I found out very quickly, very much like your style of hiking with your friends. And during the day, I'm okay when I'm by myself. It's nice to like hike at your own pace. But at the end of the day, I really appreciate it when there are people there to talk to, just mess around, talk about whatever. It's just, I don't know. I found out very quickly. It's like, no, I'm not a solo hiker forever type of person. It was nice to learn that about myself, but just sitting there, you're like, and on top of that, like hearing random sounds in the middle of the night, like we're not in grizzly country or anything. It was like, is that a bobcat? What was that type of stuff? Just like, it'd be nice if there were other people here.
One of my first 1 or 2 years out here, I decided to go for a solo trip. And it was my first time I went soloing in the Beartooth. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go someplace where I know there's going to be a lot of other people. And, I won't be alone in case something happens. But so I picked a place called Quinneball Meadows, and there's always people there. And it was September. It was after the season. So, like, most of the tourists have gone home for the year and there's no bugs. So it's a perfect time for camp. It's one of my favorite times to camp. So I set out on this trip and I get back into Quinneball Meadows and I look around and there's nobody. There's not a single person, probably for around 3 or 4 miles. And I'm like, well, crap, that plan backfired. And so, I'm sitting there and everything. And then I went to bed and it was a real calm night when I went to bed, but the wind picked up in the middle of the night. And I was woken up by this noise of something hitting the side of my tent. It was just like my eyes just popped wide open, like grabbed the bear spray. And I was like, what the hell was that? And turns out it was my guy line whipping the side of my tent because I had guyed out my tent. And but yeah, I didn't. It was like instantaneous paranoia. It's like every single noise in the backcountry was a grizzly coming to eat me. So no matter how many times you go out in the backcountry, I think those kind of things still happen.
Yep, agreed.
For me, the most uneasy that I've ever been outdoors was actually on the canoe trip with Gaska in Boundary Waters. And it was the two of us in a boat, but he stayed in a tent. I slept in a hammock. But in the evenings, like after you go to bed and stuff like that, I I don't know what it was. It wasn't like fear of animals or anything. Yeah, there was something about it being separated, from the mainland and having to canoe somewhere like that. I don't know. That was probably my like most unnerving experience
Yeah, just
outside.
isolation, maybe.
Yeah, but I'm also a guy that will go and voluntarily sleep in a cave for multiple days and be perfectly fine, with four of us. But yeah, I don't know.
We all have our limitations in life.
Yeah.
Some of
No,
them just
for
are
sure.
different than others.
For sure.
So you said that you made the transition, from outdoor recreation into now outdoor retail. One of the things that we've discussed previously is that aside from everyone experiencing the outdoors differently based on their gender, race, sexual orientation, etc. That is I guess we'll call in the moment, types could be a potential stressor. But in order to even begin, one of the big things is, outdoor gear is expensive, and actually, even renting, this on the ski trip this past week, the two people in our group were shopping around for rental rates for skis, versus and like driving to save, money on this stuff. So that's one of those things is there's a paywall. Do you have any recommendations, as to kind of minimize that paywall if you're wanting to go outside?
Yeah, it's a tough one because so I work in a local store. It's a small store in comparison, so it's not like a big box type store. And so I think one of the advantages to that smaller store is that typically the people that work there are usually of a higher experience level. They probably use the gear, and so I think it can be really helpful to interact, I think, on that level because I think if you go online, you don't really have that interaction with people, and even going on a YouTube channel and listening to some bozo who has a channel talk about gear can be a little bit intimidating because there's so many different things out there. And some places that you go to are going to try to try to sell you the most expensive thing they can. Whereas like with our store, we approach it more about what can we do to give the best possible experience. So like if you come up and say you're looking for such and such item, my first questions are going to be, okay, well, what are your goals? What are you looking to use for? Like, what are your, what's your experience level? And it's always interesting because people, they're like, hey, I'm looking for a backpack. I'm like, okay, well, what are you looking to use it for? And they're going to look at you kind of like, I don't know, to carry stuff. And what I mean by that is like, are you going, how long are you looking to go out? Are you looking to do a hike along a long trail, or are you looking to do overnight stuff? And so I think an opportunity to actually have a person to talk to, and unfortunately, you won't find it in every store, but somebody you can throw ideas back and forth who's not just out to try to sell you the highest most thing. They're looking to get you the best match for what you need. And so I think that can be a little bit kind of easier for people to come in because I've definitely had a lot of new people coming in and they look at the pack wall or whatever and their eyes just kind of glaze over and they're overwhelmed. And so being able to we're kind of taught to be able to ask questions to kind of find out where we need to take the person. But as far as like actually getting into it, For me, I always tell people like, um, the easiest way to kind of get into it is really to find a community or other people that do it, and because typically most people who've been doing it for any kind of time, as you can see behind me, have accrued way more gear than they're ever going to need to use. And so I think the first step is just finding somebody else to go along with, because typically they're going to be able to outfit you with all but the probably the most major things. And then a lot of shops are going to carry stuff like we rent packs and sleeping pads and tents and stuff like that. Those are typically the big ticket items that can make it a little bit easier to kind of get into. But the other thing I would say is like by finding somebody else to be able to do it with, you don't have to get everything at once. Like I recently had my cousin out from Florida and had the opportunity to take her up to her first ever mountain trip. And although she wanted to bring some of her own gear because she was relatively new to backpacking, and I got a lot of grief because everybody could tell her pack was grossly overweight. And I was like, man, I tried. She wasn't having it. She still made it up there. It was nice because I if she would have come out here with nothing, I could have very easily hooked her up with everything she needed. And I think once you get those experiences and you start kind of piecing meals together, things. The big things I would focus on as far as getting quality gear right from the front would be like your shoes, your pack, and your sleep system. Beyond that, you can make anything work. And despite what anybody tells you, especially what anybody on a YouTube channel tells you, you don't have to have everything squared away in order to go out and do your trip. There's nothing wrong. You see people out there all the time that are using stuff that's, it may be older hand-me-down type stuff, and that's perfectly fine as long as you're able to get it done. Use what you need to go. And typically people starting out are not going to be hiking up 11,000 foot passes on their first trip, or they're not going to be pounding out 100, 200 miles. Maybe some people do, but you can carry a lot more weight for a couple miles in. And so starting out with a little bit heavier gear is not necessarily a bad way to go. And then over time, kind of piecemeal it together if you want to upgrade things or not. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I think for me, the biggest thing is just find some other people, find the community. There's always hikers around. And if you can't find people, go to your local store. They're going to know people that are going to be they're great resources for finding other hiking groups and stuff like that, or the internet and things like that. And most backpackers are going to be more than happy to let you borrow their stuff if you go on a trip with them. So.
Yeah. And not to poo-poo on YouTube. YouTube's a good tool for this type, but person-to-person interactions are good too. Like I know this was probably a couple of years ago. I think Darwin was talking about some of his gear, and he's like, yeah, I said I used this gear, and then like a month later, it was sold out everywhere. I couldn't even get the gear I wanted because everybody just saw that I had this type of gear, and everybody's like, Darwin had it. It's good enough for me. I'll just buy that type of thing when it may not fit every person's needs. So that's very, very important distinction to make.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anytime an article will come out, or one of the brands will come out with some sort of new like shiny gear. I remember when Osprey came out with their Atmos AG anti-gravity, and they did a blitz campaign on it, and like we had everybody and their brother coming and going, I want to try this pack on. And I'm like, pump your brakes a little, let's try on a couple of different packs and see which one fits better. I'm one of those people. Like the Atmos AG is a great pack, doesn't fit me at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I just tell people it's just like shoes, everybody's different, and the best pack that you can get for your money is the one that fits you the best. Like you can work around everything else, but if that pack fits, and you almost kind of see people like trying to will their way into like fitting, like, I don't know, it kind of feels a little weird, but I think it'd be okay. I'm like, let's try a different pack on, because if it feels weird in the shop, imagine how much worse it's going to feel 20 miles down a trail.
Load it up.
Yep. And if I could have that conversation with younger Kyle, that's what it would be. It is because really is important, and that's part of what I enjoy is everyone's kit is different, and it doesn't matter if it's backpacking, skiing, snowboarding, caving, whatever. When you open up that pack, you're gonna see that there's core essentials. There are core things that you need just for basic survival and comfort. But beyond that, like I can think of, some of my friends they carry a heavier sleeping bag because they want to be warmer.
Mhm.
There's some people that have heavier boots because they want the ankle support and not have this, that, the other. Um, and it's what works for you. That's really the sage advice is it's what works for you. And if it works for you, all
That's
others
great.
be damned.
Yeah. Gear is such a funny thing. Like, it's really funny because I do gear videos and I hate doing them. They're not my favorite thing to do. I talk about gear all the time, but they get views. And no matter how many people tell you, "Oh, I want to watch awesome trips." You can put out a really awesome trip video, it gets 100 views. You put out a video about some titanium spoon and it gets 3,000 views. And I think the reason why is because gear is kind of the great equalizer. It doesn't matter if you go out for one night here and there, or if you do a through hike, everybody has to have gear. And so it kind of puts everybody on an equal playing field. But then it weirdly turns into this like way of creating competition where competition doesn't exist. And it's like, you get these people out there that like want to look down on people because of their gear choices. I'm like, dude, like not everybody's the same. My least favorite question at the shop is when people go, "Well, what do you use?" I'm like, "Man, I use what works for me, but it doesn't work for everybody."
Mm.
And, like it sounds like almost like a cop out answer, but like, it'd be very easy for me to say, "I use the most expensive pack on this wall. You should too." But it's not true because I don't. And I don't even use gear that we sell. But you know, everybody's needs are different, and I think that's the important part is looking at what your trip goals are and then getting your gear to match that.
Yeah, Kyle and I have had very similar situations. So our crew, we do it like one big adventure thing a year. And usually there's one or two people that are kind of new to it and they ask us the same questions like, what do you guys use? And there's always like three or four of us that all have different things. Like me personally, I cannot sleep on a foam mat. Can't do it. I sleep like garbage. I need a nice inflatable one. I don't care how much more it weighs. I love it. Like because if you can sleep outdoors, you're going to have a much better time. And I like trail runners. Not everybody likes trail runners. Like it's so customized to every person. So you always have to give that asterisk at the end. I use this, but
Mhm.
dot dot dot.
And you can spend an infinite amount of money
Oh yeah.
on it. I what was it the other day that I picked it up in the gear shop? Maybe it was a titanium fork. I don't know, and it was like 25 or $30, and I was like, "What?"
Was it a long one though? The long ones, they're so much better.
Oh God, I don't even know. I just picked it up and looked at it. I was like, "What? Why is this price tag on here? Surely this is wrong."
Yeah, every year it seems like it changes, and there's so many things that go into the industry that people have no idea about. Like tent prices are skyrocketed this last year, and it was because of the issues with aluminum embargoes and stuff, and DAP aluminum
Oh,
poles, which are made in Korea. Their prices went up exponentially, and so everybody's like, "I don't understand why this stuff's going up." It's like it's just the aluminum, man. Like Black Diamond used to make their stuff here, but the prices because of the shipping in the aluminum got so high they had to start sourcing from
yeah.
outside the country. So it's kind of interesting being in the industry, seeing all of that stuff. It doesn't always get like broadcasted and always seeing talking about all the different acquisitions of different companies and stuff. But I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, the main reason why I took the job I have is because man, the pro deals are awesome.
Yes, they are.
Well, you may not have any experience with this. I'm going to switch from gear again because I enjoyed the gear talk, but not everybody enjoys gear talk.
Sure.
So I'll go back to the middle-aged hiker thing.
First off, knock on very thick wood, I have been very fortunate to have avoided any major injuries in the outdoors. And I think part of that is because when I was in my late 20s, right before I quit the fire service, I had a really bad injury. I was cutting a ventilation hole in a roof on a house fire with a chainsaw, and we had a rookie on our crew, and they wanted him to come up and break through the ceiling, and he came up like a bull out of a china shop and knocked me off of the ladder, and I slid right off the two-story building, and fortunately it wasn't anything like serious skeletal wise, but I ended up in physical rehab for several months for the last 5 months of my firefighting career. Other than 2 weeks, I was in on office duty,
Mhm.
and so because of that, I learned the importance of like preventative stuff, and I started getting into things like yoga and some of those kind of things, and then obviously I we talked about my weight issues before. Obviously, I've not been great at consistency on that, but when I wasn't in shape, I definitely noticed a lot more proneness for minor injuries, aches, and pains. But I think as I've gotten older, I'm 45. I have definitely I've realized that you have to be very intentional. That's the word I'm looking for in how you approach things. You were talking about sleeping on foam mats. I used to be able to do that when I was 20. I can't do that now if I intend to be able to move the next day.
Mhm.
So my gear is definitely going to focus on that, but also like my the being able to maintain a certain level of fitness. They always say as you get older, oh, you shouldn't run. You're gonna mess up your joints, but in actuality, if you do it right, it creates strength and it actually helps. And so um, I've I've been on trips where I was the only one that didn't get up with an injury. We were coming out of a trip in the Bighorns. We were there for a week. One of the guys in the group was in his 20s. And then Jay, my hiking mentor, he's in his 70s now. Um, he ended up with a stress fracture, and the other guy ended up with a knee injury because he had too much weight. I was the only one that wasn't injured, which is really odd. But again, I think it was because, strength training and stuff like that. So, but like I say, there's a certain intentionality that kind of goes behind it. Um, I am really bad about reminding myself that I need to stretch out before I hit the trail. Like I think every time I just want to throw my stuff in the pack, drink my go juice coffee, and head down the trail. And I'm like, no, because if I do that, I'm going to hurt myself. And so I have to be very intentional in that. But I think definitely the game changes. When my hiking routine is very different now in my 40s than it was in my 20s when I was invincible and didn't know any better. And now, like, if I don't spend time in the off season preparing for the season, be it strength training or stuff like that, in the springtime, I'll start doing a lot of lunges and things like that, and just stuff to be able to basically build up those tools to prevent the injury. That said, you can do all of those things, and I've survived a whole lot of things, but then I'll go bend over to tie my shoelaces in my back and be like, nope, that's it, we're out. And so I've definitely limped my way out of a few trips, but I definitely have to be um, a little bit more proactive in avoiding injury if that's a thing. And part of that is because, like I said, I have my backpacking partner Jay, who I done a lot of my hiking with out here. He's in his 70s. He when he was in his 60s decided that he was going to run the Boston Marathon, and then the very day after, he started his through hike of the Appalachian Trail. And then 3 years after that, he did a through hike of the Pacific Crest Trail. And so, if he can survive those kind of things in his 60s, there's nothing stopping me from doing it in my 40s other than complaining. But yeah, I guess if I have to say, long story short, is I realize at 40 that I'm not invincible and that I have to take steps in order to make sure that I don't end up a pile of mush on the bottom of a trail.
No, that's all. That's all great advice. You mentioning that some medical advice is to stop running when you get older. I'm currently in that argument with my primary care physician right now. Since I've had a full ACL replacement, he's like, maybe you should just stick to biking. I'm just like, yeah, I'm gonna do that now. I love running too much, and as long as I stretch before and after, and don't like try to do 10s, 20s miles, I'm fine.
The hardest part is, and for me as a runner too, is not pushing it during that. The training, I think, is where the majority of injuries kind of occur because we try to push ourselves too far. And as infuriating as it is to my little squirrel brain to not run when my knee is sore,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think a lot of those related injuries, age-related injuries with joints, it's because people push themselves through an injury, and I don't think that's you can do that in your 20s. You can't do that in your 30s and 40s. It just gets
Agreed.
worse.
Yep.
So
Agreed.
that's very different mindset.
Yep, definitely. Well, Kyle, do you have any other questions before I do my favorite ones?
I do not. Go for it.
All right. So, one of my favorites is I ask this of everybody. What is your biggest outdoor mistake? So that can be hiking, that can be anything. Go with you've listened to the podcast, so go with what you feel.
Yeah, I had to think about this one because I've got a couple of good stories, but I came up with one, and if you'll permit me, I have to tell one story to kind of
Go
set
for it.
up the
Yeah, yeah.
premise of the other one. When I first moved out here, as I said, I was from the Midwest, and even though I had been through an outdoor leadership program, it was an Ohio-based outdoor leadership program, and so there are some things that got missed, like um, weather differences and things like that. So I very quickly out here realized the regional differences are a thing, and so I was on a solo hike. It was a day hike. It was really early in the year. I want to say it was like late May, early June, somewhere around there. Um, and I didn't think about snow being a thing. It is a thing all year round out here. But anyways, long story short, I got up to the top of this area. It was the first time I'd ever hiked there. I encountered so much snow, I was having a hard time finding the trail. I did have bear spray on me, but like I was starting to struggle. It was getting late in the day, and I heard a crack of thunder off in the distance as the storm was coming in. And I remember sitting down on a rock and taking a swig of water, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I've read this magazine article and it never ends well. And so that's where I developed this thing called the magazine test. So if the situation you're in is collectively starting to sound like one of those really bad articles you read in Backpacker magazine about the guy that had to get rescued, it's probably a good idea to turn around. And sure enough, so I did. Big storm hit, but I made it to the trailhead. Everything was fine. Snap forward a few years later, my friends and I decided to go up into an area called the Crazy Mountains, which is a mountain range here in Montana. It's the youngest mountain range, I think, in the lower 48, geographically speaking. It's an island range, and it lives up to its name. It has some really crazy weather, and we decided in our infinite wisdom to go out in October. In October in Montana, the weather can be perfectly fine or it can be an absolute nightmare. And it had been nice the entire week up to it until the night before, and there was some pretty big weather that moved through, and it doused the mountains in quite a bit of snow. But we decided we were going to go forward anyways. It was myself and two other guys, and the two other guys were about half my age, so they were in their 20s. I was in my 40s. And we set off. And the first warning sign of this trip was when we got to the trailhead, one of the vehicles had a flat tire, which had never happened before. So there's a little bit of foreshadowing there. So we got that taken care of, which of course put us in a little bit late. And so we started hiking up, and we started to encounter a pretty good amount of snow, but we were pretty well prepared. We had plenty of gear, and we would have been able to handle any kind of cold temperatures with us. We had extra snow gear. But the second warning sign was the wind started to pick up, and it got to the point where we were actually hearing trees fall around us. Not a good sign in the backcountry. But we continued to push on because bad decisions were made. But we were relatively confident at this point. As we continued up higher in the mountains, the wind just kept getting worse and worse. And it got to a point where we were encountering anywhere from 6 inches to a foot of snow. And so for me, my little magazine test light started flickering. And my 40-year-old brain was like, I don't know, this is kind of, we need to have a discussion. So I grabbed the other two guys and said, hey, I'm not saying we need to turn around or anything, but I just want to open the dialogue to make sure we're on the same page. And so I said, I have some reservations. And of course, they were like, no, we're fine. We're fine. And me being a team player, I was like, okay, yeah, sure, we're good. So we continued on. And eventually they started leaving Grandpa behind. So there was a good split between us, me, myself, and them. And I had to yell to get their attention because I almost slipped and fell into a stream, which is another warning sign that we should have probably turned around. But eventually caught up with them, and they had selected a campsite. And it seemed like it was a really great campsite because there was hardly any snow there. Hindsight being 2020, there's a reason there wasn't any snow there. It was because the wind was really bad in that area. But we got into the spot, and it was relatively calm. And so we set our tents up, and we're getting everything done. And I went over to grab something, and this just massive gust of wind came just out of nowhere. And like, I look up and I see this object about 25 feet in the air, and it's my hiking buddy's tent, fully loaded tent that has been staked in the ground, is now flying through the air 25 feet up. And I'm watching all of his clothing and his sleeping pad and his everything just falling out of it. And it was that classic, like, Bill Murray and Ghostbusters moment. Oh, there's something you don't see every day, as it kind of progresses down. And I look over at my tent, and my tent is completely flat, and not just like for a couple seconds, like sustained flat. And so, we decided that was probably a bad place to camp. And the reason why there was no snow there was because it was extremely exposed. And we rush out, and we're picking up all of my friends' socks and underwear and camping stuff and everything. And there's probably still clothing up there somewhere. And we threw it all in the pack, and grabbed the third guy in our group who had set up his hammock in like the only like protected area and had no idea what was going on. And then we had to hightail it back down, and it's starting to get dark out at this point, and the temperature's dropping, and we got into camp, and we couldn't get a fire going. The guy whose tent blew out of the ground started just like he started like coming unglued because he couldn't get the fire started, and was like stabbing wood into the ground. And we're like, "Hey, buddy, calm down. We'll work on this for a while." We were able to get a fire started. Everything worked out fine. We ended up taking it out the next day. But yeah, it was definitely one of those moments where my mistake is that despite having created this test for myself, I promptly ignored it because the younger guys in the group are like, no, it's fine. And then ultimately we got to watch a tent sail across the campsite. So, I think, again, the hindsight being, it wasn't one like massive mistake. It was a series of small mistakes that kind of led to a very rememberable experience. And ever since then, the crazy mountains, to me, they just totally live up to their name. The weather up there can be just crazy.
Absolutely sounds like it. Well, thank you. That's right the kind of thing we're looking for. So last question, and this is just the catch-all question. Is there a question we should be asking you that we just haven't? We missed?
No, I don't think so. I still
Sweet.
don't think I'm that interesting. Imposter syndrome aside, I think we covered most of it.
All right. Well, cool. Then I think it's time to bring it on home. Is there anything you want to plug, like your YouTube channel?
Yeah. So again, my YouTube channel is Everyday Backpacker. And I do trip videos are my favorites, but I do also talk about gear. I don't have any kind of sponsorships or anything like that. I just talk about the gear that I get. And I do talk about some other things relating to backpacking. I like to wax a little poetic sometimes. You will occasionally see my alter ego on there, the Chad. He started out as a comic relief because I just film by myself most of the time. And he quickly actually became a manifestation of my imposter syndrome. He just generally makes fun of me. But it's just kind of a way to keep myself from, I don't know, taking myself too seriously, I guess.
That's good.
But yeah, so again, it's pretty low budget. It's just me, but it's a lot of fun. So, or my Instagram is everyday_backpacker. It's also generally related to the channel.
Oh, cool. Yeah, both of those will be in the show notes, so everybody can get links to those there. Yeah, if you want to support the podcast, the best way to do that is rate us 5 stars. Most of that's on Apple. Write a review too. We love writing reviews. Our podcast Instagram is @MereMortalPod. We have an email address if you want to send us guests or tell us we're doing a great job, tell us Trevor rambles too much, that kind of thing. You can email us at adventuringformeremortals@gmail.com. My personal Instagram is @TrevorBowman, 2 L's, 2 N's. Kyle doesn't have any official social media, so you can wave at people that look like Kyle if you're in Central PA, or he goes skiing other places too. Just wave at people named Kyle. But you all can follow his fake Instagram account that myself and his girlfriend have complete control of. That is @Kyle doesn't have social media. We also have a Discord for the podcast that I almost forgot to mention. If that's your thing, the link to join that is in the show notes. And with that, Kalman, thanks so much for coming on. It's been a great conversation.
My pleasure.
And yeah, we'll see everybody next month. All right, bye, y'all.
Bye.